Okay, hot dog. We're live. We're not live streaming, but at least we're recording.
I was like, wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, well, I tried that this morning with Ustream and Stick'em, and it wasn't happening with Wi-Fi.
Didn't work?
No, I had to give up.
Well, the Wi-Fi wasn't working too well.
It's still really
yeah.
So much.
Yeah, that's why I had to pull in the Verizon card.
It's a nice second option to have.
Yes.
So maybe this is a perfect question to start off on, since there's been some connectivity issues in the conference so far. When you talk about moving your data externally to your business, whether you're an enterprise or small business or anything in between, internet connectivity is a huge deal.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that as a company? How do you discuss that? I know you brought up the issue of Google Gears. Where is that evolving to, and how do you deal with the offline question?
Yeah, I think it's a very fair question, because at the end of the day, however much we want to accept it, networks are somewhat flaky sometimes. For example, in the conference today, and so that is why we actually have come up with Gears technology, is to really bridge that gap. And the intention actually was not to solve it for Google. The intention was to solve it for the web, right? Let's make sure that we open source this technology, allow any web application developer to actually use it to allow an offline experience and an online experience. But ultimately, we still believe that over time, internet connectivity will become even more pervasive than it has thus far. But we recognize that there are certain places that, in an airplane, in a conference room where everyone's trying to access the internet, you may have some issues, and that's why we offer the Gears solution as a way to bridge that gap. So in terms of our productivity suite, or our suite of applications, we've launched Google Docs with Gears, and we intend to do the same thing with Gmail and Calendar kind of upcoming. So I think we're hoping that all of Google Apps will be soon ready to have a full seamless online and offline experience very shortly.
You guys want to work around the bend?
You had mentioned this morning with the Gears, with the offline access, and you used an example of a stolen laptop, and the biggest question was, PC or Mac from here. But it did sound like it is a trade-off. You can use that, but then you are putting that information back on your computer, and that's security.
It's true. I mean, and at the end of the day, right? What we need to provide is allow an IT administrator to decide what data are they comfortable allowing people to have offline access to, and what data are they not comfortable with. And so that's what we need to give them the control to make that decision. But ultimately, it will come up to the point. It will come to the point of, if you want to have an offline experience, you have to have some data stored locally on the machine, and then it's going to be a question of what's the security risk of that happening. But again, I think longer term, we still feel that ubiquitous internet connectivity is going to become more of a reality. And so hopefully this problem over the next few years is going to become less and less of an issue. It really is bridging that gap today, to making sure today, and for other places where maybe it's not going to move as fast, to make sure that we do have a solution which addresses both needs.
Changing direction a little bit, I think in companies, different types of companies, different sizes, different cultures, we're all going to take this at different speeds.
Yep.
But it sounds like you think within some period of time it is going to shift, and that people are going to be in the cloud with a lot more applications than they are today. That's going to change the picture of how IT works.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of different job skills or experience are people in IT going to need as this comes along?
Well, okay, so there's a couple of good questions in there. I think on your first point, I do think it will get there, but you're right. It's going to take different speeds for different companies. I don't think this is a kind of 2 to 5 year horizon. I think this is a 10 to 20 year horizon of companies moving from kind of their on-premise solutions to a cloud solution. And the reality is that companies are moving piecemeal, which actually makes sense, right? They need to improve the technology, they need to understand the technology. And that's kind of the tactic we've seen actually with some of our early adopters of the applications that they decide to go with, and how they're rolling out and how they're deploying it. In terms of kind of the future of IT, I think it actually does represent, there are some changes that are going to take place, but I think ultimately it's an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity for IT to really innovate on what the applications are going to be providing to their business users. Today, if you saw the talk, yesterday, if you saw the talk that Jeff Keltner gave, A Gartner study had mentioned that 80% of IT money today is for maintenance, right? Stuff that is not generating value for the organization. I think this change will allow the organization, instead of keeping the trains running, right? Not being the people who always have to kind of kick the server up and make sure it's running again. It'll allow them to actually really create value for the organization. So it's kind of unclear, I think, of how fast, again, that's going to take place, whether it's within 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. But I do think there will be a natural transition of IT kind of moving higher up the value chain, right? Instead of kind of running servers, it'll be about building new applications and really thinking about innovative ways to have new applications.
So Google has their own office productivity applications. They're partnering with Salesforce for CRM applications. Kind of where's the future of applications at Google?
Yeah.
And do you stop at the office? Where are you guys going?
So I think we've decided right now that what we're going to invest in is going to be areas of where we think we have positions of strength, which really maps the idea of really building consumer technology and then bringing it to the enterprise. And so it's no surprise actually we decided to go with Gmail as kind of the first product, because that's one of the earliest products of web applications that we had, in which we thought we had the most compelling kind of product set and expertise, given how many users actually use Gmail every day. And so we are going to be focusing on messaging, collaboration, security, and compliance. Those are the 4 main areas that we're planning to invest in and continue to improve those products. And I think there's plenty of innovation that we can actually have in them, right? These are all social applications, but there's far more places we can make them even more social and really use and leverage the cloud like no one has thus far. In terms of other applications, I think the Salesforce model is where we want to go. It turns out actually with the Salesforce integration, we did no custom work for that. That was all done through public APIs. And that's actually our intention. We want to make our applications and our data in applications fully open, so that when an organization or an end user wants to expose that data to another third-party provider, and which has a different experience, an ERP system, a CRM system, what have you, that it will work seamlessly. And so I think that's kind of our longer-term plan in terms of these kind of more traditional enterprise applications. Is that let's partner, let's integrate with existing players out there, which already have the expertise and already kind of developing and moving ahead on that.
Well, to the point, actually, of public APIs or standards that are fully open, one of the questions that, again, came up last night is, it's related to the data portability issue between social networks. It's come up. If you have a social graph, if you have a connection of people on Facebook or any one of the other millions of social networks that have now popped up, should you be able to move it somewhere else? And the question might be is if you have applications or data in the cloud and they're hosted in one platform elsewhere, should you be able to move them? And if so, how easy should it be? How important are standards to that, and what kind of commitments is Google making to them, and what standards would they be? Yeah,
and from our perspective, we are totally open. You can move in data as easy as you can move out data from our applications, the calendar, the Gmail, and the Docs products today. And I think that is the right answer for the end user, right? You should be able to take your data wherever you want to go. And again, the best scenario for the market and for innovation and for the end user is where switching costs are lower, right? So, and that's where we all want to go. Now, some are going to go faster than others. I mean, from Google's perspective, we think we can compete on the products and the quality of the products themselves, and we're willing to be open for that reason. I think you're going to find, there are certain players which will, have incentive to not be as open, but I think eventually you're going to find that openness is going to win, right? That's the internet, and openness always wins. So, you can either fight it or you can just jump on board, and Google has decided to jump on board. In terms of how easy we'll make it to move from one to another, our general philosophy is let's expose APIs, and let's walk through an example of we have a platform and Salesforce has a platform. Both partners will have APIs, and there'll have to be a bridge of some sort, right? Someone will have to build that bridge, and we actually already have third-party providers building those bridges, right? They're building the bridges to existing kind of applications, whether it be existing LDAP servers, which kind of pull in, pull out user information, or migration services, which will pull email from an existing on-premise solution into Google Apps. And I think the third parties will really kind of bridge that gap of how do I move from one to another. So hopefully it will be relatively straightforward, where customers don't feel like they're locked in. right? That's at the end of the day, it's going to be the challenge.
And that may very well be true with data. What about applications? Google App Engine is now actively taking developers and encouraging them to go and build applications there.
Yeah.
So is Facebook. Obviously, people are putting them on Amazon. And as Barney brought up, there are tons of SaaS applications popping up all over Force.com.
Yeah.
How do you create a value proposition that's different from those places? How do you partner with them? How do you deal with potentially having customers move elsewhere?
I think from our perspective, I think we're less worried about kind of how we're going to differentiate with the other players. I think what we're trying to do is deliver a great user experience, right, for the developer network. And that's why we chose to actually make it as simple as easy as possible, right? We're offering the full stack in App Engine, so you don't have to think about anything, right? If you just want to write a web application, you can go and do so on our infrastructure. But I think longer term, where Google's going to have an advantage, I think, is going to be what we believe is the best infrastructure in the world, right? The thing that powers, probably the fastest product right now in the web, which is Google Search, but it powers, a variety of other applications, and I think that's where we think we can really provide advantage and benefit to developers, and so they can come onto our platform.
Okay. It kind of heading back, and I know this is a little away from the Google products specifically, more just as we start to move toward cloud SaaS, on-demand, any combination or term you wish to use. Do you think we'll find that there will be people in enterprises that are charged with either starting to explore or maintain any sort of on-demand services for their company, and on the other side, or even to be developing on-demand services for their customers? Or is that something that we might just see is done here and there?
It's actually hard to tell. I don't know, and I tried to make this point earlier today as well. It's kind of hard to tell where this is going to go and how fast it's going to go. Right? It's a huge potential opportunity for IT organizations. It's a question of how they use that, and I actually can't honestly say how that's going to work because it is such early stages of what's this transition that's happening. I do think as IT kind of moves up the value chain and really emphasizes and builds out applications which are really provide high value, you will have people managing that in a more clear way. But it's really hard to say how exactly that's going to work in most companies, because I think even most companies don't know how that answers. Even the ones that have early adopters, I don't think have that answer yet.
What have you seen so far?
So far, I think we've still seen people still have kind of partial transitions to the cloud, right? So they'll take on Gmail as their infrastructure for mail messaging, but they have plenty of other infrastructure that they're still hosting. And so I think it's still going to take time for a company, especially a large company, to kind of make a wholesale transition to Google Apps. But maybe Google is a great example, right? Google is in the cloud already, but we've kind of already had to do that transition of we have our IT organization, which really does focus on value creation inside our company and not worrying about let the Gmail kind of infrastructure guys worry about that. Don't worry about keeping that up, but let Google Apps be the kind of the engine that's powering us, and let's focus our employees on building new applications inside of Google, which are going to be relevant for our internal systems.
Who's paying for Google Apps right now? You have the Google Apps, the Enterprise Edition. Is that what it's
called? It's called the Premier Edition.
Premier Edition,
yeah.
Right? Enterprise is the one right below that, right?
Well, we actually we have two editions: Standard Edition, which is for kind of small businesses, nonprofits, affinity groups. Then we have Premier Edition, which is the business product, and then we have the Education Edition, which is targeted to universities.
Who's using Premier right now? Who's paying for it? What types of companies?
So we actually have a pretty wide range. So we've definitely had most adoption in small businesses, and that's not unexpected, right? Small businesses can more easily make the full transition to the cloud. The benefits are just so far more compelling to them. They don't have legacy systems as much, and so I think that's definitely where we have most success. But we have had success in the mid-market and now the large enterprise. So Genentech was a great example of a large enterprise as we move over to kind of this cloud paradigm with Google Apps. And in terms of consistency across like what type of companies, I think we've actually had verticals, a variety of different verticals, some more surprising than others, right? Some that you would expect to be the last adopters someone like a heavily regulated industry like Genentech or a heavily regulated industry like finance companies, we've actually had a lot of traction with those as well. And we're working with several right now. So I wouldn't say we've had a consistent kind of experience across verticals. I think more we've had very strong success in small business, and we're moving up the chain now.
What do you see as kind of the ideal progression from your point of view? I mean, you're mentioning that a lot of organizations are just starting with Gmail.
Yeah.
I mean, how does that move across your application suite?
Yeah, actually, I think what you'll find is actually kind of the easiest way to make the transition is to start with the security and compliance tools, and that's actually where we've seen a lot of adoption as well. Postini has basically every one of Postini's customers has 100% of their email going through Google data centers, right? So that's already kind of a transition that companies need to make and be comfortable with. But Postini has made a lot of success in very large Fortune 100 companies with that technology. And then it's a question of the application itself you want to use. Do you want to use also, you're routing your email through us, why don't we also deliver that in a web application for you with Gmail? And then once we have that, why don't you start taking a look at some of the other products, right? It's a $50 per user per year, includes all this entire suite of products. And so we have seen a lot of people start with Gmail, or start with Postini, then go to Gmail, and then come through, or even just start directly with Gmail, because it's very compelling.
You mentioned Postini.
Mm-hmm.
That was a major acquisition from a security standpoint, and you've already addressed that to some extent, and that's a part of what the talk was too. You've made the case that by putting the data in the cloud, it's not actually going to exist in the local thin client, therefore data would be more secure. How do you address the concerns of, say, international customers who are a bit concerned about having their data from their Office applications, which may be, say, hosted on Google data centers in the US, from being held from the U.S. government under new laws? Yeah. And how do you deal with compliance issues where people actually still feel the need to duplicate that data locally?
Yeah. So let me answer the second one first. On the compliance issue, the great thing about Postini is that they do have a very powerful compliance engine, which allows companies that, if for whatever reason they want to have their own store of the data, it allows them to do that. And it's primarily with email right now, but we are working with Postini to have that compliance engine work across all of Google App Services. On the first question, I think it's a valid concern for a variety of companies, international companies. And there's two aspects to it. The first is obviously the Patriot Act is the primary concern that most companies have, and there is actually a lot of extraneous kind of talk about what the Patriot Act can do and can't do, and we've been fortunate that we can have our lawyers go in and really dig deep into what can and can't happen. And that's actually the start of the conversation. We've been talking with a variety of companies, some in the U.S., some outside the U.S., and once you walk through the details, some of the concerns get a little bit lower. But that doesn't change the perception issue, right? The reality is that there might be some regulated companies that are in Europe that only can have their data in Europe, just like there are some companies in the U.S. that can only have their data in the U.S. To that fact, we are looking at ways to kind of have more control of the data location. It's hard to say how that would exactly work given how our infrastructure is designed today, because again, you don't want to lose the benefits of the scalability that we're providing, right? That's the real core benefit you're getting. But we understand that there are going to be customers out there that are going to have additional requirements there. So we are evaluating having kind of more granular control about where you can store your data.
And again, to go back to the security about data in transit, when you talk about the cloud, again, it has to move. Mm-hmm. What provisions do you take both against more private concerns? People are always trying to gain competitive advantage. And then what provisions do you take against government concerns? Because obviously we know that the NSA is out there filtering traffic. Yeah. How is Google dealing with that? How is your relationship going to be with the government when you hold so many people's Office applications within your data centers?
Yeah, and I think it's a very good question. I think we've shown already that we are willing to kind of fight the case for end users in circumstances, especially when the government is involved. I think back in 2006, when the government actually asked us for search history of a set of users, we fought tooth and nail against it, and actually we won the case, which actually had a kind of a defining moment for privacy for the entire internet. And I think Google's going to continue to demonstrate that we will fight for our end users when we see there are things that we don't believe are justifiable or reasonable requests by the government. But that being said, we do have to follow law, and we are constrained by that. We are going to follow U.S. law because we are a U.S. entity.
What about laws in other countries? What if China comes to you and asks for cloud-based information?
That we actually do have better answers for because we are not a U.S. based. We are a U.S. based company, and we do get requests, and we fight them tooth and nail. Again, just like we fight for our users essentially.
Okay.
Again, switching direction completely. Moving forward with Google Apps and looking at bringing on enterprise customers in the mid-market and going up to the larger enterprises, and what needs to move forward as far as functionality and because to be honest, I hope you don't take this as a knock, I really like Google Docs, but it doesn't offer nearly as much as most major word processors.
Yep. So that's a very good question. On the large enterprise side, we recognize that Docs is not a full replacement, right? And actually, what we're seeing with a lot of adoption is people are using Office and Docs together, right? When they want to do a collaborative document where they need to work with other people as like meeting notes or actually something they want to share with other people, they use Google Docs. But if you want to do a high fidelity type of newsletter of some sort, then Microsoft Word is a more natural product to use for that. And we have actually no problem with that, to be quite honest. We're all about opening choice for users, and we don't have to own the user in any sense, right? We just want them to be engaged with our products. But I will say that over time, I think we are going to kind of close that gap. And over the last year, we've already demonstrated that we can, fairly quickly close the gap. Last year I think we had over 40 major enhancements to the product. And we're just going to continue that level of innovation, right? Every 2 weeks, every month, every week, actually, we release new features in some of these products, and we're kind of pushing the paradigm. But we don't necessarily feel that we have to replace existing technology. We just want to provide a tool that users really find useful for their day-to-day productivity use.
As you do move forward, either to replace or augment, you're still looking for a space in the market with these applications. Who do you see and what products do you see as the major competition in that space?
It's hard to say actually. Again, Google doesn't do a very good job of kind of evaluating what competitive offerings are, right? Our job is to kind of find what end users want.
But I mean, who's out there and is looking at the same things. I mean, who are you keeping an eye on? I mean, you're leading in some areas, but what do you see other companies headed for, and who are those companies, and what other products do you expect?
So, again, I don't know if there's any one company that we're kind of looking at that way, right? In terms of like how they're pushing the boundary. I think it's great for the industry, especially the kind of the cloud services industry like us, of more competitors coming into this space, because we really want to have new and different ways of innovating, which is going to move people from on-premise to the cloud. I think that's our gain, is that we as an industry kind of move up the chain and get more customers. So I'd love to have more and more people who have innovative ways of actually approaching the same problem that Google's approached. For us going forward, I think it's still going to be about how do you leverage what the cloud is offering to really design these products, right? The great benefit of Google Docs and spreadsheets and presentations was it was designed with the cloud in mind, right? Collaboration was a core component of that product. But I think it's the first step, right? We still are trying to understand and develop the new innovations that really can take advantage of the cloud more so, and really rethink all the features that are existing in the existing spreadsheet. And so one great example I like to give is, with spreadsheets, we didn't have an autofill feature, right? Which is the feature of, you take 1, 2, 3 and pull it down. So we asked an engineer, hey, we've had a lot of customer requests for this, why don't we put that in? And instead of just going and doing it, he kind of thought through the problem and said, what would be cool? Instead of just typing 1, 2, 3, wouldn't it be cool if I typed California, Arizona, New Jersey, and it just pulled up all the states? Right. So he actually went and developed that. He understood that this information is actually on the web fairly easily. We have a product called Google Sets, which actually aggregates this type of information. And now the autofill, there's a way to do the autofill where you can actually pull against Google Sites. Right? It's those type of innovations which we're still in the very early stages of. But I think those are the things that really are going to change, like how these products are used today with the cloud.
Things that just wouldn't even really work in an on-premise solution.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Exactly. That's okay.
So who are you selling to within an organization? I think the obvious parallel is with some of the software as a service players and CRM in particular, where the on-premise kind of enterprise applications were bulky and the normal sales guys didn't want to use them. And that's where sort of Salesforce found its sweet spot, was a quick, easy to deploy on-demand application. Where's your sweet spot?
It's interesting. It actually does differ based on kind of the segment. So especially in the EDU segment, almost everyone, all the students are the ones driving the adoption of Google Apps across the organization, right? It's like Northwestern had some great stats. I think 30 to 40% of people were already forwarding email to Gmail. And so the student body went and actually made a formal proposal saying, look, we want to move to Gmail. Why don't you make this happen? And that's actually how they came to us, and we talked them through that scenario. And in the business side, I think we do have two approaches. We are directly talking to CIOs and the people who are managing the messaging systems today. And we're generally in the conversation for most companies that are now deciding on what the next technology platform is going to be for their messaging and collaboration solution, which is great. So we do have a lot of kind of inbound, sales talks with CIOs across the board. And then on the other side of it, though, we are interacting directly with users. So we launched something called Google Apps Team Edition, which allows end users to get up and running on Google Docs and Google Spreadsheets and start using it within their organization with the same level of security that we provide kind of our business paying users, right? We make sure that when you share things, it's shared only within the people in the organization. You have kind of tighter controls of who you can share with, how you can find other people in the company. And that's the other approach we're taking, is that we do want to enable end users to actually be engaged in our products and try them out, learn it, and they can actually make a case to their own organization that this is the right thing for them.
One more time? One more. Well, then let me ask the question I wanted to ask. Where does the cloud not fit? We had a great question last night from a CIO in California who worked for the Public Commission. Mm-hmm. And she brought up a lot of concerns that maybe some commercial folks wouldn't have with respect to moving the people's data off of government servers and putting it somewhere else. Yeah. Now, as a businessman, obviously you want to try to pull in as much data as possible, and Google has been lobbying Congress to be as transparent as possible. Mm-hmm. But as a citizen, do you think any kind of private company should be holding public data? Specifically, a lot of the kinds of data that may be quite damaging if it ever became, obviously, public.
Yeah, I think we are a little bit farther away in the government case of holding very proprietary confidential data, because there is an obligation, like she mentioned, there is an obligation for the government to protect this information. And I think that's going to be a case where the higher cost of the government actually going and doing that may be more beneficial to the citizens or the people actually running the IT organization of the government. But I do think there's plenty of opportunity in government where we can add value and the cloud can actually add value. And we actually talked about it afterwards, after that meeting, and actually I'm going to meet with her, and I met her boss today. So we're going to set up a meeting next week, because I think they're very excited about this, right? There are areas where transparency is critical for them, and there is information that is public information. They want to make sure it's more easily kind of transparent and available to people. In terms of the broader question, I think, of where the limits to cloud computing, I think you're going to find the same thing which probably people were talking about when they had on-premise solutions back in the day, when they're migrating from mainframe to on-premise. You probably had similar discussions of, it's going to take some companies 20 years to kind of work through the issues. But the technology and the platform is so compelling that I feel like we're going to work through the issues. And that's just, I don't mean to, this is something we believe in and stuff like that, but it's just such a different value proposition for organizations in terms of cost, in terms of how they can use their resources, and how they can develop new applications for themselves or their customers, that I feel like we'll find a way to kind of work through those challenges. And I can't say at this point in time there's going to be a certain case where it'll never happen. I can't believe that, because I feel like We have a long time to figure it out, and Google and other places, other companies have very interesting, smart people who can put interesting solutions to these problems. So I do believe just longer term that is the right way to go.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.